And I hope we learn a lot tonight. Aly, we'll learn more about her in a minute, and her assistant Wendy, we'll learn more about Wendy. But I'd like to tell you first a little bit about AAUW. The American Association of University Women has been around since 1881. It's a national organization with over 170,000 members. And its mission is to support women and girls in education, the workplace, and women's rights. And as you probably will agree with me, there's some work to be done. We're slipping back a little bit, so the organization is working really hard through advocacy, education, and research to promote women's rights and equality in the workplace and women's education. And so we meet once a month from September to May, and we support Middlebury College women in mentoring middle school girls. We raise money to send for women's scholarships for post-second graduate education. And we also sponsor a speaker series. And this is our third year having the speaker series. We have a theme, and this year we didn't name the theme, but most of our speakers are around women. We're going to look at nursing, we're going to look at women in science, and of course tonight, it's parents, it's families, and which, as we know, quite often falls on women's shoulders. So tonight is called Vermont's Child Care Campaign. It's about Let's Grow Kids. And the format is Aly will talk with us for a bit, and then we'll open the floors for comments and questions. We should be done by 8, but if we have questions and comments that go longer than 8, you're free to stay. So I'm pleased to have with us this evening Aly Richards, who is the CEO of Let's Grow Kids and Vermont's Care Campaign, Child Care Campaign, Systems Change in Action, because we know it's a whole system-wide change that needs to be done right from the bottom up with child care. So Aly will talk about access to high-quality, affordable child care for our youngest children, how it's so important for early learning, development, and a good workforce, resilient economy. Right? That's why we're here tonight. We all believe in that. As CEO of Let's Grow Kids, Aly draws on extensive experience in state and national policy. She served as Deputy Chief of Staff for Vermont Governor Peter Shumlin, where she led efforts to support early childhood education, and get this, including winning competitive federal grants totaling, grab a chair, $70 million. And supporting the causes of universal kindergarten, that's also a clap. She currently serves as a trustee of the University of Vermont Medical Center and the Vermont Council on Rural Development, and was recently named Change Maker for Children by Save the Children. She grew up in Newbury, Vermont, now lives in Montpelier, is a mother of twin boys. We'll talk about that in a minute. And recently, the Fortune magazine launched a podcast called Where's My Village? And it's all about the child care crisis. They interviewed Aly as part of the podcast, along with their own child care champion, Becca Ballant, and also U.S. Senator Patty Murray. So Aly lives with her husband. Here comes the personal part that we all love to hear about. Aly lives with her husband, James Pepper, and has identical twin boys who are now how old?
I'm going to be 4 next month.
Wow, life's getting easier. Yeah,
Wow. She's here tonight.
And she's here tonight, and she looks pretty good. Yeah. The boys are named Bo and Wesley, and 2 dogs, Bella and Ellie. As I said, they live in Montpelier. And she can often be found at a local creek finding the best skipping stones, and also sampling apple cider donuts and maple creamies. And you must try Burnham's maple creamies here in Vermont. They're the best I've had. I've sampled lots. So if you ever are away, go to Burnham's.
Okay.
Partaking in many adventures in the Green Mountains, from Vin's to the Burlington Bike Path. So without further ado, Aly, and before we start, I also need to tell you that Wendy has great swag on that table. She has beautiful signs to put in your lawn, because we're going to be voting on lots of important things coming up related to child care, and stickers and gorgeous t-shirts, some from size 2, 3, and 4, adult, small, medium, large, The only caveat, yes, it's free, but we'd really like you to wear it, right? Along with the stickers too, so. And AAUW has a table. We'd love to have new people join us. We're a great group of people. We celebrated our 100th anniversary this year because we were started in 1922, along with our most senior member, Clara Calitri, who turned 100. So that's pretty special. Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to take that?
I think probably a good idea.
Like you're reading books.
Okay, let's pop this on. Full wardrobe change right in front of you here. Nice if I can do this. Hi everyone. It's so good to see you all. Oh, done that a couple times. It really is exciting to be here with you all. Can you hear this okay? Yeah. Great. So, as Ian said, thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm Aly, I'm the CEO of Let's Grow Kids, and I do have a formal presentation where I can really dive into the meat and potatoes of Vermont's child care campaign. But I feel like it's just a lovely, intimate group. I just would like to start, if you don't mind, telling you a little bit about how the heck I got here, standing before you, a child care evangelist, which I am, I think you'll find momentarily. And I was thinking a lot about your organization, and I am who doesn't want to be a part of the American Association of University Women? And yes, that is a group I do want to be a part of, and it's such an amazing mission. And thank you all for coming out tonight. It made me think a little bit about when I was graduating from college myself. And I remember thinking about my own grandfather, actually, because he was a captain in World War II. And he actually took over the command of a destroyer in the middle of the war, and they called him the old man because he was 30. Can you believe that? So I was graduating from college and thought, I gotta get going. If I'm gonna make my mark, keep pace with the old man, I better do something fast. So I landed in my dream job on the Obama campaign, in his first presidential campaign. And I thought, yes, we're gonna change the world. And I remember actually when he won, I cried because I thought we were going to heal ourselves in this country from the thing that has really ruptured us from the beginning. And I think I cried because I just didn't think until it happened it was possible. And then I got promoted to political fundraising, which I wish that money wasn't such a big deal in politics. But I thought, okay, I'll grit my teeth and play the game. We can make change, through hard work and policy and bipartisanship. Can you guess what happened? We lost everything. We lost everything. Everything that we worked so hard for in that moment. Every midterm election, we lost. We wasted hundreds of millions of dollars, but what I think was way, way worse, and for me personally, was that nothing was getting done. Nothing. What I realized working in that environment in DC was that if you didn't agree with each other, you didn't just stop working together, you stopped talking to each other. You stopped going to the same restaurants, you stopped walking the same side of the streets. So I felt pretty silly. I felt pretty stupid as a young person trying to make change, thinking that I could do that, thinking this was the way to do it. So I came home to Vermont. And I was licking my wounds a little bit from that. I wasn't sure what I was gonna be able to do, get myself motivated for, but I decided I would dust myself off, try again, and that's when I started working for the governor. And I started talking to people all over Vermont, all sorts of people, different people from different backgrounds across the state. And what I found really interesting was that childcare continued to come up as this key topic. All roads lead back to childcare. If you think about it, what do I mean? Kids need a healthy start, right? So we have exponentially increasing costs in education, mental health, healthcare. Well, that's because kids aren't getting what they need at the most foundational time of their lives. We'll hear more from Sue and Tammy and others about this later. Businesses can't hire, can't grow. That's because there's no childcare for their families to support them. Population, demographics, everything that's stressing us in Vermont because we have a population decline. That's because people are not having children, choosing not to have kids, or choosing just to have one because they can't find or afford childcare. Such a fundamental decision in your life that is being dictated by something
as seemingly logistical as a childcare infrastructure. So what happened was childcare became my project for the governor, and then it became my life because I found my lever. And what do I mean by my lever? You know, that thing that you can actually touch, you can actually change, that you can pull it with other people together, and when you do it, it has these seismic ripple effects through sectors and generations. That's childcare for me. And as you heard about in great detail, I appreciate that, I'm a mom now. And of course, yeah, twins. Try to find 2 infants childcare spaces, right? And so I come back to this one hand for yourself, one hand for your ship, because constantly that is what I have been doing as a young professional with kids in a big job. How do you find that balance? How do we all help each other find that balance? Childcare is the ultimate representation of that. So we all can have one hand for ourselves, one hand for the ship. And what I love about that too is the way we fix childcare is also one hand for yourself, one hand for your ship. We all pay in to create this infrastructure, and guess what? The ramifications are spectacular. Our kids are well, our families aren't stressed, our economy's thriving. You know, Sue and Tammy, you are in charge of our next generation. And so that is why I'm a childcare evangelist, in summary. And that's why I'm so excited to be here, because we are on the cusp of historic transformation in Vermont. It is about to happen. It's been a long time in the coming. We are the first state that's ready to do this. And you all can be and have to be, I'll say, major leaders in this, because it's going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard to push us over the finish line, but we know we need it. And what a better place than this group with your mission to be talking about this. Because if you know, sometimes you say, well, it's next in the evolution from suffrage, right? How are women? You know, I have boys, but if I had 2 little girls, I'd like to be able to say to them, you do whatever you want, and not, well, you do whatever you want until you have kids, and then you have to make some really, really hard, impossible decisions about yourself and your future, you know, and the world. So that's why we're here. I have a formal presentation that I will now get into that helps sort of dive right into the details. What are the numbers? What are we talking about? How are we making change? And how can you all be a part of it? So I'm going to do that now. And just so it's not just me talking, and we will have plenty of time for discussion, but just so it's not me talking, we do a video. And I have no idea how to play it.
Just move the mouse down. You should be able to.
Ooh. Before the pandemic, more than half of Vermont's youngest children didn't have access to the childcare they needed. Now the problem is even worse. And this is a problem that impacts all Vermonters, not just those of us with children. Because when working families can't find or afford high-quality childcare, parents can't work, which means they can't earn a living or contribute to Vermont's economy. Vermont businesses can't hire the employees they need or retain the employees they have, which means Vermont's economy can't recover or grow. Most importantly, too many children miss out on the strong start during the most essential years for healthy development. Vermonters need a high-quality childcare system that parents can afford and access, a system that meets the diverse needs of all Vermont's children and families, a system that's staffed by highly trained early childhood educators who are valued and properly compensated for their essential work.
The need is clear, and the time is now to solve this problem once and for all. That's why we've launched Vermont's Childcare Campaign. This campaign will empower Vermonters to advocate for the policy change and public investment needed to sustain a high-quality childcare system that meets the needs of all Vermont children and families and supports a better future for all Vermonters.
When you join Vermont's Childcare Campaign, you are joining 40,000 Vermonters who are actively calling for change. You're standing with parents, grandparents, early childhood educators, business leaders, employees, lawmakers, philanthropists, community organizations. You're taking action on behalf of all of our children, on behalf of our shared future. And you're joining a national movement in which Vermont has the opportunity to become the first state in the nation
to deliver a high-quality, affordable childcare system that meets the need. With your support, together we will secure a bright future for our children, our families, our communities, and our economy. Childcare is essential, and it's time to invest in what's essential. Visit letsgrowkids.org and become a childcare champion today.
Childcare story. This is my family. I'm very, very proud to have pictures of them in the presentation. So let's dive into some of the numbers. What are we talking about when we're talking about Vermont's childcare crisis? It's kind of shocking. Let me warn you. Okay, 3 out of 5 of Vermont's youngest kids in Vermont today do not have access to the childcare they need. That's 8,700 children, just to be clear. Today in Vermont, under 6, who need childcare, don't have it. So you can't find it. That's the number one thing. It's not accessible. And then those who feel like they won the lottery because they have found that amazing space with Sue, with Tammy, with all these great programs here in town, they're paying up to 30 or 40% of their household income on that care. It's more than any other thing you spend money on, including your mortgage. On the flip side, 71% of center-based childcare programs in Vermont are experiencing staffing shortages. Why? Because the average wage for an early educator in Vermont is $14 an hour. Without healthcare benefits, right? Without any benefits. So that is, start thinking about the perverse incentives that are baked right into that system, right? What we often say to summarize that, parents cannot afford to pay more, and early educators cannot afford to make less. So something's very much wrong with the model. So what are we seeking? We're seeking a childcare system that is accessible, equitable, high quality, affordable, sustainable, okay? And so these are the elements that we've been working towards for many, many years with a large coalition, which I'll tell you about in a moment. Let's Grow Kids is sort of a catalyst. Think about us as a change agent. We actually plan to go away. We mean it. We're really going away in 2025. How can we possibly do that? Because our goal is high quality, affordable childcare for all who need it in Vermont by 2025. And that deadline has caused some really constructive pressure for all of us. We are holding our own feet to the fire and our partners' feet to the fire. The best chance at solving this is now with the Let's Grow Kids on the ground. Let me just explain for a second. So what is Let's Grow Kids? How do we approach this problem? We're philanthropically funded. We're basically like a private change agent. And we do 3 major things: people, policy, and programs. So people. This picture is very sort of symbolic. You saw in the video too. Over 1,000 people that day came to Church Street to rally for childcare from across the state. You just don't see turnout like that on most issues. We have over 40,000 Vermonters. That's 5% of our entire population actively involved in the childcare campaign in some way. They're in our database, they're volunteering, they're contacting their legislator, they're writing an op-ed. So that's the people. We also work on the program side. So in other words, we're in communities like your community, understanding what's going on the ground with childcare, increasing the quality, increasing the capacity, reducing barriers, and all of that information feeds the 3rd leg of the stool, the policy work. You cannot fix this without changing the law, without public investment. That is the solution. And so we've been working on the details of that policy, best practices, national expertise, community engagement on building that legislation. At the same time, we're thinking about successful implementation, and we're getting the public to have their voices heard in building all of this, but also to understand the multi-dimensions of this issue. Often, and when I was in the governor's office, you will find someone will say, great, pass a bill. Magically, when that ink is signed, everything will be better. We know that's not the case. If you don't think about implementation, it just is not effective. And then sometimes you get so far ahead, you look behind and you're alone. You really need to bring the public along with you. So Let's Grow Kids basically has been this entity on the ground facilitating this movement with those 3 component parts. And all of our practice has come to this moment. Just to give you a little bit more of a sense of how we approach this work, these are the guiding principles that we've always used. as we think about this movement. Commitment to children, collaboration, inclusion, agility, strategy, transparency. These are the things that we've really internally at Let's for Kids, externally with our partners, held to ensure not only are we being open and collaborative in this very important transformative process, we aren't accidentally baking inequity into the change, right? We're going after a major system transformation. And so we're lifting up voices of historically marginalized communities in that work, so we're not accidentally creating a system that is inaccessible or creating other inequities down the road. So these are just to give you a sense of how we approach our work. So the vision. We are at a moment, right? We have this huge problem in Vermont. Childcare is not affordable, it's not accessible, and it doesn't pay to be an early educator when you're doing arguably the most important job in our society, right? So, what are we doing about this, right? This isn't just a problem in Vermont, it's a problem across this country. There's good news. We have a plan. It's data-driven. It is politically popular. It is bipartisan. And we've already laid the foundation for moving it forward in Vermont. So last year we passed a bill that actually said we will in Vermont accomplish our goals for transforming childcare. It made initial investments and then it put 2 studies in place that are going on right now. The vision for this transformed system is that no family pays more than 10% of their household income as a cap for childcare. And then it's a really generous sliding fee scale below that. So it's a huge reduction in the cost for all families who have childcare. For early educators, there's a minimum compensation standard for all early educators that truly improves sort of the money, the amount of money going into the field. So for example, for Tammy, for Sue, for other early educators in your area, you actually say, you must make no less than this salary that is much more commensurate to a kindergarten teacher, which is a huge departure from what we've seen today. And as I mentioned, keeping equity at the center is incredibly important for all the reasons that you talked about earlier, Anne, about the mission of your organization. It's about socioeconomic equity, it's about gender equity, it's about racial equity, everything from the fact that kids actually start recognizing skin color by the age of 6 months old, to the idea that you can have these inclusive environments, these welcoming environments, starting at such a young age, and a diverse workforce. All of these are very important elements that have been considered as we continue to build policy out. As you heard maybe a little bit in that video, we are also a case study for this nation. And some people care about this and some people don't, just to be honest. It's like, well, let's just fix this in Vermont for Vermonters. But the beauty of this is that we have a history in Vermont of going first and proving a principle, proving a point, and then showing the world all the wonderful things that happen when you get it right. So that's what we're seeing here. We were the first in the country to offer universal pre-K to 3 and 4-year-olds tied to a sustainable funding source. Huge benefits from that. About 80% of Vermont's 3 and 4-year-olds are accessing publicly funded pre-K today, thanks to that law. We really believe that when we get this right in Vermont, we can show not only does the sky not fall when you invest in the childcare system, you start seeing incredible returns on your economy, on your outcomes for kids, on your outcomes for women, beyond. So another summary about, we have a plan, it's data-driven, it is on a path. Here's some numbers behind that. I said 40,000, so this is out of date. 40,000 supporters, every day more, right? I bet a couple of you haven't signed our pledge until tonight. You're adding to this number right here. The way to individually, we'll get to this at the end, the way to individually be a part of this campaign is to join the campaign, to sign our pledge, to say, I believe that we must fix childcare, 10% affordability for families, early education wages, and we understand that public investment is a piece of the puzzle. So that's what those 35,000, now 40,000 Vermonters are saying from across sectors, across backgrounds. We are fueled by philanthropy, so we have donors, we have corporate sponsors, we have healthcare professionals, the legislators, business leaders. We now have over 150 businesses, individual businesses from across Vermont endorsing this child care campaign. So this is just to give you a sense of who's involved and how we're doing this. As I mentioned, we passed a foundational bill last year that set this all in motion. I just want to now tell you about what moment that we're in. Let me go to the next slide. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. So we are now about to make our final move, right? We have laid the foundation, have established the legislation, have the coalition, have the policy details, and we had to get involved in politics because that's the way the world works, right? So it is a law that we need to pass. So in order to do that, we need lawmakers and the governor to understand exactly what it is we're doing, understand the value, and be supportive. We endorsed candidates this year for the first time ever. This was a way of getting involved in politics that we've not done before, and you often don't see organizations do. We didn't set out to endorse 131 people, but what happened was we started talking to candidates from all parties, and they said, yeah, I'm running on childcare. I'm committed to fixing this. I know it's public investment. I know how important this is, and I'm going to do this. You know, this is the Vermont that we want to live in. I understand there's a huge return. We have to get this done for our communities. So we ended up endorsing 131 folks, including a lot of your local folks, and you can find out who they are on our website, and you can tell them thank you, and you can kind of hold them accountable, stay on them. Once they become elected, then you can say thank you, and then make sure that they're doing what they're saying they're doing, right? This is a really important tool that we've never used before. So, because you all are so actively minded already, I want to sort of show you with some detail how you can get involved in the campaign. But before I do, I just want to mention again, why is this so, as you said, this is for kids and families. Absolutely. We can explore that together. It's also for Vermont. Every single dollar that you invest in childcare goes to a human being. It goes to an early educator by greatly increasing their wage. Almost a profession of almost entirely women who, again, are making $14 an hour right now on average in Vermont. Doing the most important job in our society, educating our next generation, okay? And so all these dollars, when you make a public investment, they go to lift up the wages of early educators as a key component of quality. The other dollars go to Vermonters who can now afford childcare. So think about that. It's like a stimulus effect on your economy, right? All of a sudden, you're making this public investment and it pays for itself immediately 3 times over, and then it pays for itself again 3 times over the lifetime of these kids who no longer need special education in many cases, mental health supports, all the way up to the criminal justice system. And this is a heartbreaking thing to say, but how many times do we hear kindergarten teachers say, I've looked around my classroom and I can tell you right there, 5 years old, who is going to need supports and who doesn't. You know, we should all be committed, as I know we are, to an equal shot for every kid, no matter the circumstances you were born into. And our best chance is early childhood, high quality, affordable, accessible early childhood in an equitable system. So, you know, this is why you get this return on investment. This is why Ben Bernanke, the former chair of the Fed, is a major childcare champion. That's why Janet Yellen actually just recently came to Vermont and started talking about childcare for her entire speech at Leahy's Women Economic Development Conference. Because you do not see return on investment like this for any other policy. Here's another dimension of it. We have projections across the state that are pretty much agreed upon that we need about 11,000 new workers a year. 11,000 new workers a year in our economy for the next several years to be sort of a sustainable economy with a proper growth curve so that we have a fair amount of taxpayers to ensure that we are a functional state, frankly. We know that 5,000, mostly women, already live in Vermont, already have houses, would like to be in a job, but can't because they can't find or afford childcare. So if you think about the labor shortage, if you think about businesses' inability to grow, childcare is one of those few things that actually pushes thousands of people back into the workforce who already, again, are part of our infrastructure. Because then you start thinking about the intersectionality things. Well, we need more people to move to Vermont. Sure, well, where are they going to live? We have a housing crisis. We have a broadband problem. All of the above. How elegant is it that childcare is the right place to start? Because it's our kids, because it's upstream, because we so desperately need this for their well-being, for our family's well-being, but also when you do it, you jumpstart your economy. You release all of these cost pressure valves down the road. You start allowing yourselves to think about how to fund housing, to think about how to fund all these really important issues that we've been so constrained around, especially in a rural economy like Vermont. So what can you do about this, right? I really push on this business aspect because it's the business champions recently that have been stepping up because we're talking about money. I mentioned earlier we passed the bill that said, we in Vermont will do this. We will have affordability for families, we will have early education wages. 2 studies. 1, how are we going to govern the system? How are we going to make sure it's regulated so we're getting what we're promising out of it? And 2, how are we going to pay for it? So I'll tell you, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. Our earlier estimate in, I think, 2016, was about $206 million. Our newer estimates now update that to real numbers, $300-ish million. That's a lot of money. But we spend $1.8 billion on K-12 in Vermont. So what we're saying is, for $300 million a year, you have the highest quality, accessible, affordable childcare system that supports the programs, that supports the early educators, and it increases economic activity in Vermont by $755 million. So right there, immediately, a 3-to-1 payoff when you make that investment. Why businesses are starting to become very important in this conversation is because they are saying, usually, I would say, no new revenue, don't talk to me about taxes, do not make Vermont less affordable than it already is. Now they're saying, Vermont's already not affordable. I can't stay here, I can't hire, I cannot do business. What are we gonna do about this? Childcare is the only thing that allows them to grow, find employees, think about the bench, think about shifting this tough status quo. And they can make the argument that they're already paying more today in recruitment, retention, scholarship, childcare scholarships than they would if we all paid in to a system of childcare for $300-ish million, right? It pays for itself immediately, and businesses are the ones that can help show that on their own bottom line. And so they're really stepping up, and this return on investment argument is really getting traction. Let me just say, I wish we didn't live in a world that it was until we started talking about the economics of it that got people's attention. That's what's amazing about childcare, as I mentioned earlier with my own personal story. It's any door in. It's for the kids, it's for the economy, it's for the brain science, it's for healthcare, it's for mental health, right? Anything you care about leads back to childcare as this sort of foundational solution. So until we started talking about the cold, hard capitalist case, we didn't get the type of traction we're seeing now. The other thing is COVID. COVID really blew the smoke away from this issue for so many more folks. So that's why we're at this moment to get this done this year. What can you do about it? As I mentioned earlier, you can take the child care pledge. As an individual, that's your way of getting into the movement. You get our updates, you're linked into your action team. When we need someone to talk to a local legislator, you can do it. When we need testimony, you can share your story. You know, this is a way to get into the campaign. Contact your candidates now and after they win. So now you can tell them, look, what matters to me is childcare for whatever reason it is, because I'm a grandparent helping with my grandkids, and I see that this is not working, because I'm an employer and I can't hire, because I see the generational cycles that we aren't breaking because we're not fixing this. Whatever your story is, talk to your candidates. They're a captive audience right now. They want to be educated on this issue. They're really prioritizing this issue, and that's a great thing for us. So by the way, all of that is available on our website. We make it very easy to get involved. Other ways to support, you can share this information with your friends, your family. Have a conversation about childcare. I have to tell you, it's not intuitive for everybody that it's such an important, hugely beneficial, again, I'll go back to my earlier word, lever for us to pull about all the things that we care about. You know, it is becoming a joke that I go around the state all the time, and some people tell me, oh, that's nice, Aly, that you do childcare stuff. It's not really my thing, but I'm glad someone's thinking about it. And I sort of start saying, okay, tell me what you care about. And I can help explain why childcare is your thing, right? It's that upstream root cause. So you can share this information, you can start getting people excited about childcare the way that you all are excited, that you're informed about childcare. You can follow us on social media, you can sign up for an event. If you are a business leader, you can endorse the campaign. These are all ways you can get involved. And again, Wendy has all this material. You can come onto our website. We've made it very, very easy. So that's the bulk of the detail I wanted to share. The nitty-gritty. What are the numbers behind the crisis? Why does it matter? How can you get involved? Thank you so much for being here. The rest of our evening together is conversation. I can't wait to hear, why are you here? What do you want to know more about? What details are you missing? And to get us started, we have two amazing champions, leaders, volunteers, both in the advocacy movement, but also in the field. Sue White and Linda January. I'm sure many of you know them, maybe all of you know them. They have been actively involved from day one, helping to get folks to understand what the heck it is we're talking about, why it matters, why it's so important. Earlier I was introduced to Tammy, who's also an early educator, so I'd love to hear, why are you here? What's going to get this exciting for you? What more tools do you maybe need to become leaders in this movement to get this done for Vermont? So I'm going to hand it over to Sue and then Linda. Would you like this fun microphone, or do you want to project?
I'd be happy to project.
Okay.
I've been out on the playground all afternoon.
Thank you, Aly.
I just want
Aly?
to the slide, wonderful. Cross out to 3 to 5, and cross out, and this is the positive direction.
Thank you for your eagle eye. That's the thing. It is such a crisis. Thank you so much. It's such a great way to sort of end the formal presentation in the end, is that we are in a crisis now. But when you turn the crisis around, it is our greatest opportunity to have a flourishing Vermont. When I truly think about where do I want to live? What community do I want to be part of? It's a community that has this figured out for their kids and their early educators.
Thank you, Aly. So I thought about what I was going to tell you all afternoon, and Aly has said just about all of it.
Every word there is to say about childcare.
Pretty much. And I love that she self-identifies as an evangelist. It's so wonderful, because I've been using terms like advocate and career path early educator, which is something that I coined maybe 5 years ago. I started my work with childcare in the 80s. I am indeed a career path early educator. I'm the teaching director at Quarry Hill School, which is in Middlebury. It's a pre-K program, so we serve 3 to 5-year-olds. We take advantage, we are a pre-K partner, so 5 years ago we were able to draw down that $3,500 for 10 hours a week of pre-K programming, which is only available for 3 and 4-year-olds. It's not available for infants and toddlers, but that has made a huge difference in our world, in our bottom line, in the world of our families who write a check each month, that they have a $350 credit that helps pay for their childcare every month. But that is coming off of a $900 bill. It's that 40%, 30% that we're talking about, that people are really saddled with. And you know, it's a car payment. I mean, it's a car payment these days for sure, but it really rivals those big expenses. So that's really critical. I wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of quality childcare. And I link it to brain development, which is something that I don't know if you've heard about. As early educators, we've heard a lot about it over the last 10, 15 years because it's cutting edge. Scientists used to not really know much about children's brains. They would learn about brains from autopsies that they would do from the elderly or the sick. They didn't know that 80% of brain development happens before a kid ever enters their kindergarten classroom, ever gets there. So what we're all doing as parents and grandparents and providers for these young people is completely essential. That they get the serve and return that maybe you've heard about. When they go ooh, you go ooh, you know, with a little one. And then when they're 1 or 2, they're walking along, it's like 1, 2, and then you say 3, 4. Those are the building blocks. And the bing, 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 the millions of synapses that happen every single moment for these little people is critical to what takes them to the door of their kindergarten classroom. And that kindergarten teacher can look around the room and say, you have had that serve and return, and you have had those environments that are bringing your brain exactly what it needs so that it can fire in those channels that are so critical as we go into elementary school. You know, it's not what you get to go to college, it's what you get to go to kindergarten that really matters. 80%. I mean, that figure is mind-blowing, literally mind-blowing to me. So the importance of valuing early childhood education is something that we all need to really understand and run up the flagpole. I mean, Aly is amazing at running things up the flagpole, and she's been a mentor and a model for me. I met her in 2018. Those babies weren't born yet, and I was just beginning. I mean, I've been an early educator for decades, but I was just beginning my leadership path. I was just stepping into the confidence of being in front of you instead of at circle time singing songs and doing the work around brain development with small children. And now I realize how critical this role is in helping my community learn about the importance of what the work that I'm doing really, really is, and how it connects to economy, it connects to family health, it connects to community health, it connects to just vibrancy everywhere. And I just, if there's anything that I can share with you, and I would think that you probably all have, you know, as women, as mothers, as grandmothers, as aunts, as people who care about little kids, I think you all know that in your being. But it's time for that to come out of us. And it's time for us to find ways to talk about it. And I would really recommend, so it's Diane Lamphere, it's Matt Byram in the Virgins area, it's Peter Conlon in the Cornwall, Salisbury, Ripton, Hancock area, it's Caleb Elder and Mari Cordes in the Bristol area, it's maybe Jubilee McGill in the New Haven, Bridport, Weybridge, thank you. I live in Lincoln, and I don't have anybody new to vote for, and I am in touch. Mari tells me, I love getting your email. I don't get a ton of email. I get whiny emails sometimes from the guy that's road's not getting plowed. But when you email me about your passion for early childcare, and I get a sense I can call you if I have a question, she's valuing that. And the legislators like to hear from us. They don't have anybody out there gathering information from their constituents. It's them. And so if we can bring information and passion to them and our ideas and what matters to us, it gets into the committee room. It really does get there. And if 3 people can call, then it gets there, you know, it's not even 1 plus 1 plus 1. It's almost to the 3rd, because there's not a lot that they get. So I've gotten so that I have in my email, I have my list of our Addison County, what do we call them, slate. Mm-hmm. And I email them about once every 6 weeks. And I hear back. I hear back from Ruth Hardy, who's an incredible champion. And if you don't know her and if you're not in touch with her, I encourage you to, because she is responsive. I don't know what her plans are, but she is paying attention to what people want. You know, her picture's been all over social media recently because she's been to every single fall festival in the county. And she's meeting people. So Ruth, and then there's Chris Bray, who is our other senator, and then all of our representatives. They need to hear from us because this is really important. It matters. You know, if we can do this investment, our special education, it's going to drop right off. Our truancy and incarceration, it's going to fall right out. And if we can support our families through this, I mean, if any of you are grandparents supporting your children through this time of life, you know they need you because it is so stressful. You know, the diapers and the dishes and the noise and the sleep and it's hard. And when there's no childcare, your heart says, I'll do it. But then it's like, but what about my life? Because taking care of little kids is hard work. And if you can do it a little bit, that's wonderful, because the relationship that you're building with people in your family or your community it's going to come back in exponential ways. But, you know, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to? If you could be the weekend, let's do a family thing, rather than, oh, they're going to be here at 7:30 because they have a meeting at 8 and they got to get into town. So And I'm open to talking to any of you. Feel free to call me. Go to the Party Hill website. You can find me. I know Kathy knows where it is. And we just appreciate your support. You know, and Linda's going to have a different story. I saw a little post on social media today from Linda, from Otter Creek. The crisis is real around our professionals. It's hard to hire and hold good staff. So I'll turn it over to you. I don't know if that's what you were going to talk about, but I opened up my Facebook before I came down. So, 2 infant toddler teachers at Otter Creek.
Yeah. Sue, can we just say, yes, Sue, like Sue? So I got the goosebumps listening to Sue. Why? She's good. I mean, everything she's doing. But that was amazing. That is inspiring. That is the action, what you're talking about, leadership in action. Did you hear her rattle off those names? Like she's having a notes. Every single one of those is a child care champion. That is your legislator. Boom, boom, boom. And my gosh, is she right about that? Vermont is small. Do you know what these legislators tell us? Oh yeah, I hear from 5 constituents. That's a groundswell. So you are powerful.
Yeah, we are.
You matter.
Huge. Do it.
So thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Linda, please, do you want to answer?
No, I'm good without Blake. So, Linda January, I'm the executive director of Otter Creek Child Center here in the Middle area on Waverly Street. We've been in the community since 1984, and I've been there since 2011. And when I was prepping for this and talking with Wendy and everything, she asked me about my advocacy journey, and I have to say that being an advocate was never on a list of things that I thought I would be until I moved to Vermont. I grew up in Ohio, did some schooling in New York City, went back to Ohio, landed here because I fell in love with Vermont as being a camp counselor up in the Upper Valley. And it is so accessible. Like, I can't even imagine I would have the same opportunity if I would have stayed in Ohio. I really started sitting on statewide committees. There's all these statewide committees for early childhood educators to give their feedback into the larger system, and that's really where the work started. And then it kind of led to testifying, which the first time you do it at the State House is really petrifying.
The word testifying, I have to say, sounds way worse than it really is.
Very overwhelming walking into that Golden Dome the first time. And I think the last time I did it, I was sitting at my mom's kitchen table in Ohio over Zoom, kind of like saying, you know, having side conversations with the legislators. So it is so accessible that it really, for me, it just makes sense. And it's where in this role I have found fuel and passion that has been very unexpected. And I feel like it is so incredibly important for the children, the families, and the early childhood professionals to have their stories lifted to improve all of their situations. I'm very different from Sue. I have 3 pages of statistics.
These are numbers, girl.
I'm a numbers person, and so the hiring crisis is one of the things that is really impacting us. We've had 2 positions open since the middle of August, and we have had, since the middle of September, we have had 13 people apply. 5 of them have not responded at all. 4 of them have not shown up for interviews. Wow. 2 took other jobs before we even could get into it. And we have 1 tomorrow that we're hoping shows up. So it is really rough. It's really hard right now. And yet we are still kind of doing what we do for children and families. We have not been able to go back to pre-COVID hours because of the staffing crisis and just not feeling like we have adequate number of people to safely be open for 10 hours a day, which that has really impacted families. Families are having to go into work late, they're having to leave early. We have a lot of families that don't have PTO time. I'm writing notes to employers saying, yes, they have to miss, their child has to be out of school because they have the sickness. So it's just kind of this ripple effect that we've been seeing, and just stressful for families. You know, we also are a pre-K partner, and those pre-K funds are amazing, and it has decreased. We have one family who, with pre-K funds, without pre-K funds, they would have been paying for 5 days a week around 14% of their income, and now they're paying 11% of the income. So we're really seeing like those funds make a big difference. We do have families who could pay up to 23% of their income for childcare, especially if they have multiple children. We are really fortunate at Otter Creek that we have an in-house scholarship fund, and our board has really prioritized supporting families fiscally as much as possible financially. So we have one family currently with scholarships. They have 2 children, a toddler and an infant. Without that scholarship, they don't qualify for any state support. They're too young for pre-K. They miss the cutoff for state child care financial assistance, I think by less than $1,000. Without our support, they would pay 23% of their income, but with our support, they're paying 17% of their income, which is still too much. But we can't do more, and they can't do more either. And so we just really see this crisis impacting at every single level. Our teachers, we have a little bit of a higher average wage than Vermont. I think it's 17 something an hour, but you know, this out of reach, the high cost of housing report from this summer says that you need to be making $23.40 an hour to afford a fair market rent. And so we have a lot of teachers who can't afford an apartment on their own because they're not making enough. We have a lot of teachers that we lose when they turn 26 because they're no longer on their family's health insurance, and now they have to pay for health insurance. And so it's just, all of it just impacts every level of our organization. So.
Oh my gosh, Linda. So again, let me just say thank you, Linda, for everything, including being here tonight. The second presentation you made this evening after a long day of leading an early education center for your community's children, right? So I can say 8,700 kids don't have access to care. I can say $14 an hour. I can say we need 2,000 more early educators. But Linda, Sue, you bring that to life for us, right? Think about the ramifications of that. She maybe has one hire for your vacancies, already can't go back to pre-COVID hours. Think about the ramifications for Middlebury families. That means you can't open a classroom. That means 16 families all of a sudden don't have childcare when already 8,700 don't have access already. You know, and we have Quarry Hill and we have Otter Creek. So it just brings it to life for us, right? Thank you for finding time for advocacy. And you know what? Wouldn't we like a world where Linda and Sue could not think about the scholarships, could not worry about the hiring, could not do all of this work, could actually focus on the foundational skills of giving kids the best possible development, right? I mean, that is the whole idea. And you really brought to life, I think, why public investment is the answer, which I know is like, great, we all have kids. What's the rub? Well, we need to have the courage to move dollars around. But when we do, it pays for itself. So why aren't we doing this for our kids and our families? I mean, it's so obvious, it's so compelling. You can tell this is why I'm an evangelist, because the more time I spend with the data, the science, the common sense, the lived experience, it's just sort of like mind-boggling. We know exactly what to do for our kids. We have the blueprint, we have the policy. We haven't done it because it's moving money around. But you just explained exactly how the money works, right? And that's why you need that public investment, because parents cannot pay any more. They are the payer. The other payer are the early educators and the programs that take it on their backs by cutting corners, by not being able to hire. This is why the supply doesn't meet the demand, right? So you just brought all the elements to life. The last thing I want to pull up from you, Sue, too, you mentioned the brain development, right? It is so compelling. What I often say is it's not just reading, writing, arithmetic, but it is all those things, right? Think about everything you rely upon to be a functional human in our society. The ability to have healthy relationships, anger management, critical thinking, executive function, propensity for or against addictive behaviors, or chronic health. What we now know is by age 5, you actually have baked a blueprint in your body for whether or not you are more likely to get diabetes or cardiovascular disease, based on whether you have opportunities that are nurturing and educational and stimulating or not. That is the situation we are in, right? It is a real black and white moment where we have a policy prescription and it's a yes or no. Do we have the courage to move the money around, to invest in this system, to do all the things that Linda and Sue need to have a functional childcare program to care for our kids? And Tammy. Exactly. So, what questions do you have? We are running late, I'm noticing, but what questions do you have? What comments do you have? Hopefully we have a couple minutes just to hear from the crowd. Yes, and maybe you can say your name.
Frankie Dunleavy.
Hi.
It isn't a question, it's a comment. This is from an article in the English Guardian today, which was lamenting the state of childcare in the UK. But this is what they were saying about, in Finland, public early years education service for preschool children underpinned by a right to daycare for every citizen, which is free for lower income families, and a home care subsidy for those that want to look after their children at home. France, state-funded crèche available to children from the age of 2.5 months, with a strong historical notion that the government should facilitate a mother's ability to work outside the home. Germany, children have a legal right to childcare and prices are as low as 70 euros to 150 euros per child a month. Denmark, every child aged between 0 and 6 guaranteed a place in the public childcare system, with 75% of the cost consisting of government subsidies. No, it's not everywhere, and it's Western Europe, those aren't third world countries. But when I became a citizen 2 years ago, it was drummed into I was told over and over and over again, this is the greatest democracy since the beginning of time. I didn't say, I don't think so. I just signed on the dotted line. But this can be done, and I think it would be, when I got this lovely letter from, we all did, it wasn't me, but when I got this lovely letter from Senator Leahy and Senator Sanders and Representative Welch saying, we're so glad that you chose to become a citizen in Vermont and welcome to the state. I think it would be fantastic if Vermont could be the first state that goes, yes, we're putting our money where our mouth is, and it's going to reward us when we do it. So,
Hear, Frankie! Yes! Yes! I think Frankie's ready for testimony.
I'm also a granny that does some childcare for my daughter's child, and just a thing for Sue, because my husband worked at Quarry Hill with Sue.
With Vanessa.
With Vanessa. She was born in April and started school in September. And so, Dana and I knew all those things about what children get. And she got more of it than anybody else because she was there from zero. But, how do we spread the word? Well, you've told us how to spread the word. Now we get up and do it.
Go to the Action Center, get your tools, start, spreading the gospel, just like you did, exactly. And I just want to say, look to our neighbors up North Frankie too. Another example of many, and that article really was powerful today. In Quebec, they did pretty much exactly what you're proposing here. An infusion of subsidy, basically, for tuition assistance to make ends meet between parent affordability and early education wages, right? And actually, they only did the affordability. This is a good lesson for us. And they didn't do the quality piece. And they didn't get the return they wanted. oops, we messed up, they fixed it, and now they actually have basically what we were proposing, and they have the unbelievable example of low unemployment rates, especially with women, huge labor increases, and tons of gross regional product increases directly correlated to this. So we have examples, any type you'd like, right? If one doesn't suit you, try another one, because there are examples, it's real, and I just love you bringing that energy and that information to us tonight. So yes, perfect example. You all are advocates. I don't know if you all do it, but you are. Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
I'm Sue Grigg, and I have really a comment. I've been a social worker for many, many years, back in the 70s, and working with local clinics that were not private. They were state-funded, Massachusetts and town, sort of a partnership clinic is what they call them. I did a lot of work with parents and kids, the whole thing. And we also at that time were getting an infusion of Hispanic people who were very lost, didn't speak English, a lot of problems. And from the beginning, I realized the two things, childcare and housing, were the two things that kept people from thriving. And it was so frustrating. And this childcare thing is just, I just have to say how excited I am. I almost don't know where to start. And it makes me very emotional too, because it has been such a need for so long. I did some work with Head Start at one point. What happened to Head Start? I don't know.
Still there.
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
But for a few. And I've been involved with the Parent-Child Center. And one thing I do remember hearing right from the beginning was they had done some studies on their kid graduates from their program. And this is after like 20, 25 years. There had been none of their children that they were working with, the parents of these kids, had ended up in juvenile court. And that, I mean, talk about paying forward. And we always learned way back when, early intervention is the last thing that gets funded because they're dealing with the problems later. And this was such an important thing to really see in this. This is what I call early intervention. And it pays off in, as you say, in multiple ways. I'm very excited about it. Thank you
This
for
is
doing it.
Thank you. So a beautiful, organic, yet another story right here that, forget about the statistics, you just brought something to life. You just tapped into my heart, my head, my emotion in a way that no presentation could do. And that is the power as well of you sharing your story and the perspective of, why haven't we fixed this? This has been a problem since from where you've sat right in the thick of it for so long. You know, people need to hear that from you. Thank you so much. Thank you, really. Thank you so much. Yeah, Mary.
I just want to champion childcare workers, particularly. I know we talked about those who are actually in programs, but we have many home care, childcare providers who do an enormous amount of good. I invited one here today, and she's probably a little embarrassed, but
Stop talking.
I see her
Won't be
every
embarrassed,
week.
okay?
I've known her for years. She's been at this for 20 years. I've seen all of the children that she's cared for over the years. And she is incredibly generous with her time. She takes in some of the most difficult families that I've seen. I worked as a school nurse in this community for 25 years. She has taken in some of the most difficult families, and those children are thriving in her care. And I don't know what the community would do without people like Tammy. Because they may never get to Sue's programs, right? And they need to be, they need both. They need everything. And so, she's my champion.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mary, for championing. Is there anything you want to add? Not to put you on the spot. You don't need
For
to.
Donna told me she was going to be embarrassed.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
I think this,
I do a lot for my parents. I nights and weekends. Just so, because there isn't childcare for nights and weekends.
And she helps a lot of moms who cannot take care of their children.
I think two things I was to say. For well, a couple things. Thank you all to our early educators. I want to really emphasize the importance of the family child care home in the system. The system that we're all working towards together is basically, it's a mixed delivery system that basically just says, okay, you know, this is what the funding is. Who are you? A regulated child care? Are you into the system? And if you're a family child care home, if you're a nonprofit center, a for-profit center, or school-based for 3 and 4-year-olds, and here's the money, basically, to actually pay yourself a minimum compensation salary and enough money for your families to basically pay what they truly can afford. And to your point also about other countries, it's basically lower income families paying nothing up to basically a livable wage, and then you start paying 4% of your income, 5%, all the way up to a cap at 10% for a middle income family. So I'm just thinking about the families in your care, Tammy. You have been doing this because you're so committed. You're such a wonderful human with a big heart and tons of expertise. And it's not fair that we rely on you for that, you know, and don't compensate you and don't respect this as a profession that it is, especially with what you do with your families. And we see it every single day. And so, Mary, thank you for championing this. Thank you for giving that testimonial, because we see it all the time. And you know what? I walk into these programs. Oh, yeah, I brought my family grocery shopping. They didn't know how to really grocery shop. The kids went home and said, oh, sorry, Mom, I don't eat junk anymore. And the family said, thanks a lot, what do I do? And now we know how to go grocery shopping, and we're eating healthy meals together as a family. It's this, talk about that ripple effect right there alone. You are changing generational cycles, right? I think that's what we all can know and understand. This is about this village, we were talking about it earlier. We're not making a philosophical statement. Should people stay at home? Should they not? We're just looking at the data on the ground, and families are stressed. Families need this. It should be such a joyful time. Someone sort of alluded to this in their lives. But actually, it's a really, really stressful time. And it's always that early educator that's the first to know. Is there domestic violence happening? Are they going to be late on their car payment? Do they have diapers? It's this multi-generational support. It's this modern village. And we have to recognize that and understand that it's worth every single dollar and then some that we put into it. So I really appreciate you coming. Again, I bet y'all are tired. And here you are with us in the basement conference room at 8:15. So really, thank you. Yeah.
Apropos of Tammy, my understanding is it's become way harder to be an at-home care center. Is there any way that there's more help to make that?
Such a great point. Well, and I definitely like to hear from you too. I think a lot of folks have said, well, the regulations have gone, too high, and so it's harder to be at home. But what we find in talking to folks and looking at the data, and it's a national trend, COVID really was this stressor on a system that was already systemically stressed. It's really about the money. There's just no funding in the system. So if there was money in the system, all of a sudden you'd have you turn the lights on, a functional sort of business model where you could hire a social worker, or you could be part of another system of, work. You could have a substitute, right? Like you could take care for yourself, right? That's what we don't have right now. Basically, these are one-women proprietorships, you know what I mean, that are doing everything, and their families are the only payer. And so I think that's why what we're seeing with why we have so many fewer early educators that are family childcare homes is because a generation, it's like the demographic shape, has retired and no one has opened up their doors. We've had very, very few opening family childcare homes to replace those that are retiring. But I'd be happy to open up to anyone's perspective on this. I mean, this is an interesting dynamic. What we're hoping to do is turn the lights on, right? Just release that pressure valve so folks can do it, so they can see it as a viable profession for themselves. And you can have this money so you can support your families in the way you know they need it.
And I think it is worth noting that Vermont is also leading the way in an initiative called Advancing the Profession. And that's an initiative through our if this is the legislative, if LGK is the legislative advocacy group, we have another organization that's a professional advocacy group, if you will, called the Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children, and it's the Vermont chapter of the National Association, and there's an initiative at the national level to elevate this profession. It goes hand in hand with everything that LGK is doing around legislation, but it's also from the ground bringing opinion from the field about what we need to be considered both internally and externally as professionals. And what do we need both at the regulatory level, the legislative level, and the economic and community level. And the motto of that initiative is nothing about us without us, which just speaks to the grassroots aspects of where are we going with this. And it's me, it's Linda, it's Tammy, it's center-based, it's home-based, it's, as you say, it's school-based, because all of us are in this. And we all have our own cup of tea around where it's challenging.
Thank you for mentioning that. So basically in our piece of legislation for transforming the entire sector, there's a placeholder for insert recommendations from the field. What we've done is support the associations. So it's a membership organization. It's like any professional organization. Any profession has one. Early educators, need one, right? It's this idea that they haven't been thought about as a real profession. There's not even been a name until recently. Early childhood educators is a consensus-based name that came from the field, that came from all of this work from the ground up, as Sue said. Otherwise, right, if you think about it, even a couple of years ago, childcare operator, provider, even the words daycare have sort of evolved to childcare, and so all of a sudden here we are with the field leading the charge. For me, that alone is the most historic cultural change you could imagine. It's only one piece of a big puzzle, each one of these. But I feel like for our legislators, it's like, okay, you're gonna transform this whole profession of childcare. What? Where do we even start? Don't worry about that. We've been working on it for 30 years. Here you go on a silver platter, right? How infrequent is it that something like that has happened, where the on-the-ground work has really, truly been growing, informed by those who are most connected to it. It's really an amazing, special thing, and the field truly has been leading the charge on those aspects. And that is basically, let's just say, it's like an early education A, B, and C. What are those credentials? And then what are the minimum salaries for each of those so that you're actually paying for a true profession and the quality of the work that we know we're getting. Yeah.
I have a question. Is there a way that childcare people who have studied early childhood education have an accreditation or licensure?
Grandmothered in, we'd like to say. Yeah.
What was that?
Like grandmothered into the profession in a way.
Instead of grandfather.
No. Accreditation for the people who are providing the child care.
That's
Yes.
part of what we're working on.
Yes.
That's part of what.
Giving it a name
Right.
and a process and
Yes.
a license or whatever.
Exactly.
Yes.
I
Exactly.
mean, I think that
Yes.
if you're going to go hire a lot more workers to do this, they have to have the bones to do it.
That's exactly what we're talking about. It's basically a consensus-based
Yeah.
credentialing system of an A, B, C,
I
what
see.
roles you can
I
have in and
understand
with that. And then what I thought you were asking too is then, is there a transition? Which yes, there is, in addition to like the simplified, if you're gonna be in this profession and we're gonna need all these new folks coming in, there's basically a standard set, so it's very clear from the
Exactly.
beginning, it's streamlined much more than what they call the spaghetti map today, where people thought, oh, it'd be great, any door in, that'll be great, more accessible. Actually, it's just so complicated, you can't even navigate it, so the field was, when I first said, oh no, the last thing the field needs is something new, a new credentialing system, and actually the folks like Linda and Sue were like, nope. Actually, we crave the simplicity and the streamlined, easy, straightforward system. But then there's what's called a bridge between today's workforce and this, so that folks aren't left out in the pretty massive transition that we're talking about here.
For people like Tammy, for people like me, who've been doing it forever and consider ourselves pretty well suited for it, but might not have all of the I's dotted and the T's crossed when everything shakes down in this new system. The field is thinking about us. We don't want to shut out the grandmothers in the field and the aunties in the field who are mentoring and making sure that the system has been moving. And we're working with higher ed, and there's so many pieces to the puzzle.
Well, you've heard grandfathering, let's do grandmothering.
Grandmother, absolutely.
Switch the language there. Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
If you'd like to know more about that, I'm working on that task force, and I'm happy to share. I mean, it's not really what we came here to talk about tonight, but it's a piece.
It's amazing. It is such an incredible body of work. For those who really want to dive into the weeds, I do recommend it. It is really historic. what is happening here. And yet again, Vermont is leading the nation on the field, driving this advancement as a profession. It will be a model for the country on what's happening here with that. Both the process and what you guys are coming up with, what you gals, let's just say, coming up with. It's really, there's two real elements here. There's very clear research that shows the level of preparation and support of the early educator in the room with the outcomes of the child. And that's like anything in our lives, of course. It's the human interaction in any sector, right? And so that's what's really important. But we also don't want to overcomplicate it so this is wild, right? So it's based on research, and there's a transition period, and the field is really dictating those terms. Yeah?
I just wanted to make a comment. This group, AAUW, last year had a speaker series was focused on polarization, which we've all seen and experienced, and it's very frustrating. And I'm just thinking about wheel with lots of different things coming from it, and having the child being the center, and how it's something that brings a lot from the heart from people, and it's maybe something that we all can agree on. And you presented that it's influence of all these different folks, and you're proving it and you're showing it, and it just feels like maybe this is one of the things, seeing that adorable little child. I think these little black babies are the best. I mean, I wished I had a little black baby, but you know, again, just teaching that at an early age, what influence could that have on our racial issues? That just we may be solving a lot of other problems along the way. So it just feels like a wonderful focus that we put our teeth into. And thanks for all the good work. You guys are not enthusiastic enough.
It just makes so much sense to have the child at the center, right? And to another application of what you're saying, it is a unifying issue. It is bipartisan. It crosses party lines. We're taking care of our kids, and so turns out Republicans, progressive, and Democrats, and independents all are for it. That's really important. You know, I think we want to solve big issues. I think we have that in our DNA. We want to do it. We want to prove we still can in this really tough, almost toxic, polarizing environment we live in this country, where we don't necessarily talk to our neighbors as much. I mean, I feel like in Vermont we're still holding on to that, thank goodness, but it's a unifying issue that I think we all sort of need right now that really will have big change, so I appreciate that. Vanessa?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say along those lines that there isn't a sector that this issue doesn't touch.
Exactly.
And yet, looking around this room, I don't want to assume how anyone identifies, but there's a lot of women in here. How do we get, you know, my husband right now is taking care of my child, so he's doing this part, right? But like, how, and I wonder in your work, how do you get more people at the table? I also wanted to say, just on the racial issue, I'm so proud to be raising my biracial kid in Vermont. And also the big con for me of being here is the lack of diversity. And I think that with an initiative like this, people of color can start to move to this state because it's going to help the housing crisis. I'm watching my dear friend, who's a woman of color with 2 kids, and she can't find housing here and was just kicked off the select board in Middlebury because she can't get into this zip code. And just watching how inaccessible, just watching how inaccessible it is, how can we expect to bring people of color to this state if they can't live here, literally live here?
Exactly. So much of what so let me give you a little bit of good news. It's amazing who's coming out for this issue. So for example, the other day, we're empowering people to host their peers. That's the magic. These stories you're hearing today is the magic. You and getting your networks, that's the magic. You know, I'm paid to do this, I'm out there, right? Like, I would do it if I wasn't paid, by the way, but right, it's not as effective as you all sharing your story, sharing your own, you know, backgrounds and truths on this. So we empower these host committees to just crop up these events. The example the other day was at Hula, which is the co-working space up in Burlington, 100 people at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. And I was like, I could barely get here on 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. Like, you should say, I feel like I lived a lifetime already getting out of the house this morning with my kids. How did y'all get here? And who are you? You know what I mean? I had not seen any of them before on this issue. They were young professionals of, you know, all backgrounds, all genders, at the table saying, I came here because I knew this was important, and I thought it was for kids and with you know, folks with young kids. Now I see it's for everyone. It's the thing, and I am so fired up. Put me in, coach. And someone's like, will you please use my social media? I have 125,000 followers. But yes, we will use that. Oh my gosh, that's amazing, you know? So everyone has their superpower, and when they lend it to this, that's how it happens. But just an example, yes, there are folks coming. Like I mentioned earlier, the employer community is really stepping up, because they can talk about the workforce shortage, you know, the crisis that this is one of very few real solutions to. We have this BIPOC advisory committee specific for the policy details, where we're saying, okay, look, let's make sure we don't bake these inequities in. How is this truly speaking to you? How is this truly accessible for your families? And there's, you know, what's beautiful is so much as aligning. Nope, it needs to be affordable, it needs to be accessible in my community where I live and work, and, you know, a lot of the basic tenets. But then there are things like food. Food is so important, you know, to us, and culturally competent food, and then diverse workforce. If we, you know, if our kids don't have anyone that looks like them in the program, it's a huge, you know, knock. So again, lots of initiatives happening through Vermont AAUW, through our work and stuff. So there's lots of different tentacles into what you're saying. But so one is people are coming out from all you know, backgrounds, genders, socioeconomic statuses, which is great. All those stories are necessary because different audiences need different, you know, motivations. And I'm talking about lawmakers in that case. For example, I mean, this governor, he wants to hear from mom and pop shops outside of Chittenden County. So if you know any, that's who we need to talk to the governor about why childcare is important. You know, so it's just a great point. And your point about housing, I mean, it's heartbreaking. Housing is so complicated. There's supply chain issues. There's labor, you know, you can't find contractors. You can't afford materials. There's federal law. There's, you know, local law. There's all these different incentives. And so what we're saying is, great, we're working with our housing friends. All these things are intersectional. Let's make sure we start understanding that finally. But childcare is a great thing to do first. That sort of kid in the middle of, you know, the circle that we're just talking about, because it's an immediate, yes, you can just flip a switch, put the money in, and then it starts alleviating these other issues, brings in folks, starts making even more money available for housing, et cetera, right? So it's a great place to start with our kids. Almost 8:30. Any other questions, concerns? Well, I just have to thank you all so much. What a great turnout, what a great discussion. I can just see the whole group of early childhood advocates in this room right now. And thank goodness, because it's going to take, as a no-brainer as this feels like, right? For us sitting here today having this conversation, when you're talking about dollars, it's going to take that courage. It's going to take all of us sort of saying this is our priority and you know, really participating. So thank you for being here tonight. It really means a great deal.
I can stay for a few more minutes. So if you want to sign the pledge and start being an advocate today, it's here, as is policy paperwork, free t-shirts, wear them in your community, and be a child care champion.